Hello, everybody. I'm Jennifer Keller of the Westport Library, and I have to say, it isn't often I get to host an author more than once. So I was really excited when we were told that Lauren Weisberger would speak at the Westport Library, well, to the Westport Library patrons, really, to launch her newest novel, Where the Grass is Green and the Girls Are Pretty, which goes on sale tomorrow. It's not even available today. So as you know, Lauren Weisberger is the New York Times bestselling author of The Devil Wears Prada, which was made into the beloved film. And now we can keep an eye out for Kevin McCallum and Elton John's adaptation for the stage when we get back into the world of theater, hopefully. Weisberger's 6 other novels were all bestsellers, and her books have been sold more than 13 million copies worldwide. She was last in Westport while the library was being renovated when she spoke about when life gives you Lululemons, which I still have trouble saying. Today, Lauren is joined by Jennifer Blankfein, creator and writer of Book Nation by Jen, a blog of book reviews and recommendations. She is also a marketing consultant working with lifelines.com, ourtowncrier.com, and other small businesses and authors. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We'll ask as many of those as we have time for after the discussion. And the webpage for purchasing books where you bought your ticket for tonight will stay live through 10 o'clock in case you feel the need for another copy of Where the Grass is Green and the Girls Are Pretty. So you'll be able to buy a second copy if you like right after the event as well. So without further ado, Jennifer and Lauren, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, Lauren. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Congratulations on your new book. This book, I have my copy right here. It's so great, and I'm so excited for everybody to get their copy and to read it. It's the perfect book we all need right now. Just to lose yourself in this story with these great characters and so many laugh out loud moments. I mean, I was laughing and I was crying, and I wasn't crying for myself. I was crying for these great characters.
So we need less crying, more laughing.
Crying, but for somebody else, it's okay. It just was really a fun book to read, a perfect beach book. And now is the time for everyone to get a copy, and a great gift for friends too. So congratulations on the success I'm sure it will have starting tomorrow, which is really exciting.
I know it feels crazy. It's not even on sale yet. It's really fun. I'm so excited I get to do this event the night before. So thank you for hosting me.
Sure. I'm happy to be here. So to start out, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about the story. We probably don't want spoilers because no one's read it yet. So I think we'll try to keep the spoilers out tonight, but
for sure,
just a brief summary of what the book's about.
Sure. Most importantly, this book was inspired by my sister, Dana. I have wanted to write a sister's book for a really long time, and it just felt like the perfect opportunity now. And I really wanted to get it. I wanted to capture, if not mine and my sister's exact personality qualities, because I wouldn't say that the 2 sisters in the book, their names are Peyton and Sky. I wouldn't say that either of them are actually anything like either of us. But the way that they talk to each other is that real direct, blunt, no holds barred way of the way that a sister just tells you how it is, even when you don't want to hear how it is, quite honestly. She just comes right in and lays it out. And I really wanted to bring that to the page and to have these 2 sisters have that relationship where they tell each other everything until something happens. And it was almost hard to imagine. It was hard to create and think about something that could come between them and their openness, where it's something, and again, like you said, no spoilers, but something where they couldn't necessarily share it with each other. So that was sort of the premise that I built the book around, was the sister relationship, which was really, really fun for me. And the backdrop I set it against was, you know, one of these crazy towns that a whole lot of us live in all over the country, where you have a hyper competitive group of parents who are willing to go to any lengths to give their kids every advantage, every possible advantage at every conceivable age, starting in toddlerhood all the way through college. And that's always made me so curious, like, what does that look like? Some of us know what that looks like, but what does that mean? How is that going to translate? Is that a good thing? No, clearly it's not. Spoiler alert, no. But, you know, I really just thought that whole question was really something interesting. And I really liked being able to explore it from the perspective of two super tight sisters.
So definitely there were glimmers of this town and other local towns, you know, in the book, and some were good, some were definitely good, and some not so good. You know, the good things, like for me, reading a book that has things that I can relate to, like you mentioned Golds, and I was like, oh, Golds, you know, all these little tidbits. You talked about recess duty and water slide station at field day, and all these little tidbits that I was like, oh, I can relate to that. That happens in my town. And you know, I loved that. But then the competitive environment, which resonates very, very much in Westport and lots of towns along the coast here, and probably other places too, but it definitely hit home. Did you want to have a lesson? Do you want people to walk away from this book feeling like there's a lesson in here on how to balance, how to raise your children in the town where it's very competitive?
You know, that's a really good question. And my first gut reaction was, no, I'm not preaching to anyone. I'm not trying to teach anyone anything. This was just like, I thought, an interesting topic to explore, because I think it does, like you said, you found bits and pieces of it, both positive and negative, that make you feel like these characters could have lived in your town. It's funny, I was speaking to someone earlier today who lives in New York City, and she said, it's like, she's like, I feel like these characters live in my building on the Upper East Side, except my doorman's not as nice as Peter. And I was like, oh, that's great. I love that. I love that it, you know, it does sort of translate. And it's funny, you know, I hear from friends who live in Maryland and in certain suburbs in Texas and outside of Seattle, like, this is not just a New England phenomenon. I feel like this is something that's happening across the country in lots of different places. And so I have no opinions on teaching anyone anything, you know, primarily, like you had said earlier, the book is meant to be entertaining and something you throw in your beach bag, and hopefully you can like lose yourself in. There's no politics, there's no pandemic. But I wanted, you know, I just really thought it was like, it's something that continues to interest me. It feels different from when we were growing up. You know, you could be a good student and play sports and have a social life, and everything felt not all that difficult. And things now, even though my kids are still young, and it's not as though we're anywhere near the college acceptance phase, things just seem really much more intense. And intense people and intense situations make for really good social satire too.
Right. You have a really great skill of picking out those things and bringing them to life, where I feel like all of your readers are going to find something that they can really relate to, which is so great, because that's how the author can connect with the reader without actually being there and talking to them in person. I also found that you have such a great observation skill when it comes to people and to finding things that are humorous or that cause feelings. Like for me to be reading something, and for example, in the beginning of the story, you're talking about a waitress and she uses the word irregardless. And that's like fingernails on a chalkboard for me. And so I have a feeling right away. And then you mentioned other things that I have opinions about and memories of, like the temple coat closet, which, I mean, I haven't ever said those words probably in 40 years.
But you kissed a boy in one, didn't you, during your like bar mitzvah season? I guarantee it.
Right, but that's what I mean. Like, how did you know that? Or you talk about bathtub births, you know, something that you would maybe have some crazy conversation about, you know, lots of these little snippets that you include in the story that just had me thinking and laughing and just pulling me deeper into the characters and into the setting, which is really such a treat. And your sense of humor, the way that you use the words to describe things like a TV the size of a mattress, or the whole conversation about renting chickens for the summer and having the chicken chef deliver the home cooked vegetarian risotto, like ridiculous things that just made me think, oh my God, I think I might know someone that does that.
I did it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm here to tell you, okay, this is where sort of fact meets fiction. We did rent chickens for not only one summer, for 2 summers. There is a farmer in Connecticut who will bring you the chickens and bring you the coop and set it all up. And you collect the eggs every day. And then the second the first frost comes, he just disappears them. He just comes and sweeps it all away. It was that the part about the organic food and all of their services that they receive, that part was just exaggerated and made up, but somewhat based in reality.
Crazy and hysterical to be reading about this. So my question to you is, do you see all this humor in your life all the time? And was it easy for you to include those observations in the book? Or do you have to like think of all these outrageous things and make a list and then weave it into the story to make it juicy? How do you do that? How do you come up with these things?
I mean, I think a lot of it is just in everyday life. It's stealing stories and anecdotes from my friends and family. You know, my friends are among, I think, the funniest people in the whole world. And they, you know, we have these email exchanges and these conversations, and they definitely find their way into my writing. My sister, she says the most insane things you could ever imagine to me on a daily basis. Some of the stories she's told me have definitely found her way in here. I have a wonder, my OBGYN, she's on the Upper East Side, and she has a sort of very fancy practice, and she's amazing. And she's been a friend of mine for 20 years. And I remember, you know, years ago, she said, well, you know, home delivery is for pizza, not for babies. And I was like, whatever your opinion is on this subject, that's amazing. That's just the funniest thing, you know. And that example, that was in the first chapter, what you're talking about. Kind of Peyton adopts that kind of attitude about it and takes her line. So I would say it's more of an everyday kind of in real life situation.
Do you think any of your friends, when they read this book, will they recognize stories or things? Will they see themselves in this book?
They will definitely see anecdotes and stories and inside jokes and emails lifted and text streams lifted, for sure. Definitely. But in a good way. Good stuff. Yeah. Right.
Very funny. Okay, now I'm going to ask you about music. And what is your relationship with Guns N' Roses?
I mean, who doesn't love Guns N' Roses? I just, you know, I wouldn't say Guns N' Roses specifically, although I do love that, but like I have a real soft spot in my heart, and always have and always will, for 80s hair bands. I mean, anything that kind of qualified as really bad hair band music, 80s wise, I have pretty much on replay in my car at all times. So Aerosmith, Whitesnake, Cinderella, Damn Yankees, like all of it. The worse, the better, in my opinion. So I kind of couldn't resist. It fit the subject. I love the music. It kind of makes me sing it in my head. So, and I feel like that kind of music was the backdrop of our sort of childhood and teenage years. And it brings me back there, which was a happy time.
Right. I love it. I actually, every time you mention a song in the book, I Googled it and I listened to it. And then I was like brought back. I'm like, oh my God, I love this song.
Right? You're like, why don't I listen to this anymore? Like every day. Yeah. I'll
Exactly.
send you my playlist after the chat. Yeah.
Yes, I even have that in my notes. Send me a playlist because if there's something about that, it's so great to go back to those days, those feelings. It's very fun.
I will, definitely.
Okay, so let's talk about characters. Max, the daughter of Peyton, who's the newscaster, she's my favorite character. She is a teenage girl. She's anxious to be finished with high school, and she has some issues that she has to overcome that have been created by her parents. And she's very down to earth, even though she's been put into a situation, into a school and living in a place that's not really fitting her personality. So despite her environment, she's really the kind of person that I like. Her real self shines through in the end. And I just wondered, who was your favorite character? Who do you relate to the most? And who did you like to write the most, which could be different?
That's a really good question. I would say individual character. Like I kind of said before, I liked the actual writing I enjoyed the most was the dialogue between the two sisters, trying to nail that and make that real, and their mom. I really had fun with that, and that was just exciting for me to try to get that really right on the page. But I would agree with you that if I had to pick a favorite character, I would also choose Max. Like you said, she's the imperfect 17-year-old daughter of a very, very, very perfect woman. And that's always an interesting combination, I find. The more type A and the more perfect the mom, it seems to be the less that her daughter wants to emulate that. And I've always kind of been curious why and how that looks. And like you said, Max is really awesome. She goes to the fanciest private school in New York City. She's slotted to go to one of the fanciest Ivy League schools there are, that exists, and something, without giving too much away, is going to undo all of that. But how she responds to it and how she reacts to it and what she thinks and feels about it in spite of the way that she's been raised, I think is really interesting. And I hope everyone else does too. She was fun to write, and it was challenging. I've never written from the perspective of a teenage girl before, and I'm far from being one, obviously. And I had to check in with my niece every now and then, like, does this sound right? Are we snapping now? Are we TikTok? Like, that part was really challenging, really challenging. Plus it changed, over the course of the 2 years it took to write the book. Like, all of my teenage references were completely rendered irrelevant. So to keep kind of trying to keep that updated was challenging, but it was fun to write her.
I did wonder about research, if you had to talk to anyone for any of the characters, especially Peyton, who did you talk to about that? About being a TV newscaster, morning show host, and all of the things that she went through to keep up how she looked, and her private gym, and all of her dermatology processes that she went through.
Yes, I know. She has a pretty intense regimen. But I have some friends who are anchors on various television shows, and I've always been so intrigued by how they do it. They seem like Wonder Women to me. They are Wonder Women. They're picked up in the middle of the night when everyone else is sleeping, and like whisked into a studio and completely done over hair and makeup, and then they're live on TV, and the cameras are shining, and they're beamed into literally tens of millions of homes across the country, and they're on, and they know what they're talking about, and the idea that like breaking news can happen while you're live on air and somebody's talking into your ear and you're trying to process that and explain it to people in real time. I find that fascinating. It's something I could never do. I would never have the skill set for, and I'm in awe of people. So that was exciting to write. Somebody like that, a real type A go-getter, super confident, super smart, who just has a real take no prisoners attitude and just gets it done. That's not how I would describe myself, and it was interesting to kind of explore that in someone in a fictional character and see what she would look like. I mean, a whole lot of it I just made up. So, but a lot of it was informed by, you know, friends I have who are in the industry.
Right. It seemed accurate to me from what I know.
It was the sexist co-host that I made up. He was fun to make up too, but
Right.
he's a real pig, but fun to write.
Yeah, it's fun to read. Fun to read too. All right. So since you wrote The Devil Wears Prada, you've been releasing a book like every 2 or 3 years. So do you feel pressure in having to get out a new book? And do you worry about how it's going to be received? I mean, your first book was an incredible experience, which most authors do not ever have in a lifetime. But as a debut author, that was really a special thing that happened to you with that book. Do you worry that you're not going to have that same success? Do you even think about that when you're writing, or are you just writing because you love to write? I mean, what are those feelings that you have?
It's a great question. You know, like you said, my first novel was The Devil Wears Prada, and then everything that happened with it afterwards with the movie, and it was phenomenal and overwhelming and crazy and amazing. And it was, certainly with the benefit now of hindsight, like it was a once in a lifetime situation. And I feel so grateful to have had it. I could not understand it or process it or appreciate it or any of those things when I was in the middle of it. It was just like, oh my God, you know, sort of went from I can't believe like a real American publisher is going to publish my book and people can walk into a bookstore and buy it, to like Meryl Streep in a couple short years. That was just head spinning. So it was wonderful. And since that, you know, the first book after that, which was called Everyone Worth Knowing, was really challenging. You know, that sophomore effort, I think, was the hardest of all. That was sort of the book where people say, okay, she might have gotten lucky the first time. Can we do this again? And, you know, that had me kind of in a tizzy. I was in a panic about that one. It doesn't get easier with the next ones. They never get easy. Each one has its own challenges, whether it's in the actual writing or it's in your own personal life. You know, I've written through morning sickness and nursing and sleepless nights with babies and all of that, you know, moving and illness, like all of those things that everyone experiences. So that, you know, makes certain times and certain books more challenging. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't worry about how they were received or how people read them or what they think about them. I mean, it's so important to me. I feel like my readers have grown up with me. You know, there are new readers. It's exciting. It's really cool to see people say, like, you know, like 16, 17, 18-year-old girls say, I saw this movie and I thought it was so cool and I didn't even know it was a book. And then I went and read the book, and, you know, it's like a new generation, but so many of my readers have kind of grown up with me over the last, however many, let's not count them, years. And that's really cool, but I feel a responsibility to that too. Like I love that they wait for another book and they you know, buy the next one as soon as it comes out. And I want them to love it. And I want them to feel connected to it and to feel as though, you know, we're kind of in this together. You know, my books started out, I think in the beginning, there was a lot of like young and single and dating in New York. And like now we're in a very different place. It's a completely, I think I've kind of like run, certainly not the gamut, but moved it along. And that part has been fun. You know, I do, like you said, I do tend to publish every 2 or 3 years. That seems to be about the most that I can manage and maintain my sanity and also be like a present parent, which is something that's really important to me. I think if that got ramped up anymore, I would kind of lose the family focus that I can have now, which to me is the best of both worlds. So that's
Right.
kind
And
of how that's
it's
gone.
been working, so it's a good plan, you know.
Well, it has, thanks to readers, and thanks to like everyone watching tonight, and people who are excited when a new book comes out, even if it's been a couple of years, which I love and so appreciate.
So this book that we're talking about tonight, how long did it take you from beginning to end to write, and where were you during the pandemic? What was it like to write this book during this time period?
I think like everyone, like this was a really challenging time period. This was a challenging book for me to write, because I rewrote the first half like a whole bunch of times. I started out all different ways, and I can't give too much. I don't want to give too much of the book away, but I started out where the main action of the book was something that one of the husbands did, and then I wrote the whole thing, and then I realized that my female characters, my leads, my narrators were just like reacting to something that he did. And I didn't love that. Like I had to write the whole thing to figure it out, but I didn't love that like all of their action and decisions were just like reactions to something that he did. So I rewrote it from a totally different perspective. And again, I don't want to like spoil anything because it is kind of the crux of the story. But I wanted my women to take some action. For better or worse, I wanted them to be responsible and see what happened from there. Make the calls, make the decisions, not all of them good, some of them really bad. But what does that mean? How does that translate? So that was something that took a lot more time. I think I did a lot more rewriting, and like, it's the first time I've ever really like scrapped a whole lot of words, like 60, 70,000 words, just goodbye. And that was disheartening in the beginning and hard, but then excited when I sort of found the thread again. And, added on to that, that was right around the time that like everything shut down and everything started. And it was hard to be perfectly, it was, I usually work alone. I write alone. I'm not used to going to an office. I'm not used to commuting or being surrounded by lots of people. So that part wasn't difficult, but it was, to be perfectly honest, it was really hard having kids at home. All of a sudden they were just, my whole working schedule, writing schedule revolves around like their school schedule. I work when they go to school, and when they're home, I don't. But that was just blown up. So that made it really hard to have everyone kind of in the same place. There was never any quiet. And as any mom knows, like it was always time for a meal and a snack and a cleanup and a Zoom, and they needed a thing with the school. And so all of that did make it kind of hard to focus and write, like, plus like all of like the horror of what was happening around us. It's not, it's hard to sort of conjure up a happy, beachy creativity, in that kind of environment. So I'm curious to see what other people say. I'm curious. It's definitely a beach read. It's like frothy and fluffy and fun, but there is a serious thread in there. And I'm curious to see if people think that that's different from the other books. If so, I would blame it on what's gone on for the last, 15 or so months.
Right. When you decided to rewrite the first part of the story, do you just pick one character and write that one character storyline all the way through, or do you do it all at once? Like, how do you come up with the story that has all these different parts to it and progress it the way that you do?
I do it all at once. I've never really been like a pull apart type of writer. I have a general idea of the story, of where it's going, of how it's progressing, of not necessarily how I want it to end, but this is beach read. So, it's, spoiler alert, it's going to have a happy ending usually. And it's, I don't know exactly how the characters will resolve their conflicts, but I have a general idea of where I'd like them to be by the end of the book. And with this, it took like a really natural shape because I switched off perspectives every third chapter, roughly. I didn't stick to it exactly. There were times it just didn't work for the story. So at one point I was like, it must be Skye's turn at this point in the book because we haven't seen her in a while. And I said, no, we can't be that regimented. Nobody's keeping track. Nobody's keeping score. How many chapters each character gets, So a little bit of feel and a little bit of planning. And then the story just takes it from there.
So earlier you had mentioned about writing the dialogue, that you enjoyed that between the sisters. And I found your dialogue writing to be so smooth and so engaging. And most of the book is dialogue. There's a balance between description, but the dialogue it just keeps you in the story the whole time. And I just wondered how did you learn to write dialogue? Because that's not something that writers know necessarily. It's a different skill.
I mean, I really appreciate that. That's the part that's the most fun for me to write, but I think it's just from reading. I mean, I think that's how I learned everything about writing, is from reading, is from endless reading. And I'm drawn to those types of books and characters, chatty, talky, lots of it. I'm drawn to people who are like that. I love words, and I love hearing people articulate their thoughts really well. That's exciting to me in a weird way. So I try to sort of bring that to the page. I'm never certain how successful I am, but that's the part of writing that I really enjoy the most. That's a part that while I'm sitting at a desk staring at a laptop, that flows the most for me. Much more so than, describing, setting a scene or describing what somebody's wearing or, the setting of where they are. That's what really makes it, that feels easy for me.
And I think that comes through because that's what I found to be so enjoyable. I couldn't wait to hear what they were going to say next, little observations that they had and the language they used. So I think it probably comes through. What you enjoy most is what we enjoy most as readers. So that's a good match. I have a question for you about the titles of the chapters. They're so funny, so creative. Do you write them as you go along, or do you go back after you read them, and did you change any of them? I mean, they're really great titles.
I love that. I totally do it afterwards, always afterwards. And well after the first draft is over, after everything's sorted, and I kind of go back and I skim through the chapter and I see if a phrase jumps out. Sometimes a phrase will just jump out at me and demand to be a chapter title. Other times I need to work a little harder for it, but that's one of the most fun parts of the process. The book to me feels real and it feels ready. I do this in all of my books when I name my chapters. That's when it really takes shape in my head, as this is going to go forward. Other people may actually read this. It's time to get these in order and have them properly named. And it has to make me smile or laugh too to include it. There cannot be serious chapter titles. It's such a good opportunity to have fun with it. So
it really is. And a lot of authors don't do that. I mean, most books that I read don't have titles. And it's such a great addition. I mean, I love that. So
I'm so glad. It's why not?
Yeah, I looked at them carefully every time and I went back to them. So
love that.
Was there anything in the book that you had in there before that you took out, that you wish you kept in, after all of your revisions and everything?
Good question. No, there's definitely not anything that comes to mind. There's probably 100 things I wish I could take out right now. That's always the case. There's just that feel, and I'm joking a little bit, but that feeling that once you kind of hear, once I get the heads up from Random House that it's closed, it's shut.
One more
done.
thing.
It's done. You know, I was starting to get emails towards the end, like, no more changes more than one word on a page. And I was like, you know, those are the kind of, like, they just send me into a panic. And even now, like, I don't know that even since The Devil Wears Prada published, like, I honestly can't say that I've sat down and reread the entire book from start to finish, because I would just die. Like, seeing now, like, what I should have and could have done with it is somewhat torturous. You know, some of the references and some of the explanations, like, they make me cringe. I want to just, like, rip my eyes out. But
Also, a lot of time has passed. So you've developed as a writer so much between when you wrote that and now.
Hopefully, yes, hopefully. Yeah. So, you know, I've learned that there's not a lot, once it's kind of closed and sent, and I'm getting really firm emails that we're done, that you can't make any more changes, I don't want to read it anymore.
Right. All right. I have a few other little questions.
Yeah.
One is that the sisters that you write about, they drink a lot of Pinot Grigio. And I just wondered, what's your favorite? You must be drinking it if you're writing that they're drinking it all the time.
I do not, so weird. I don't drink wine. I get migraines from wine. I drink no wine, no red, no white, nothing ever. I get like horrible migraines, but I like tequila and lime, a little bit of tequila, a little bit of lime, and a little bit of agave. I will never say no to that. And that's only like a headache, like 1 out of 10 times. So I'm willing to roll those dice for that.
Okay. See, for me, that's a sure headache. So I don't know.
We are getting old is the answer here.
I think that's part of it. I'm drinking a lot of tea these days.
Oh, no.
The cover of this book, I love the cover so
You
much.
do? Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
I love it. It's so bold, and I think it's great. I love the earring, the whole thing. Did you have any say in it, or did they show you more than one option? How did the cover come about?
Totally. The covers are, it's one of my favorite parts of the whole process, because it's really collaborative. You have this amazing art department at your publisher, and these amazing art directors and artists who work on all of these different concepts. They read your book, they try to capture it. There's all these different things that they have to consider. Of course, like, how is it going to look on a screen, and how is it going to look on a Kindle? And, you know, there's all these technical considerations that go into it. And then there's all these, like, just sort of feeling considerations. How does it make me feel? Do I want to pick it up? Does it distinguish itself? Does it really tell what the story is without giving too much away? You know, you detailed the earrings, and my 10-year-old daughter is like obsessed with that part of the cover. She stares at it all the time, and she said, so is that the only clue on the cover, or is there another one I'm missing? You know, so those little details I think are really fun. And when we do it, there's a lot of back and forth where we adjust color and font and typeset, and you know, once we get down to like one concept that we really all like. But I've found this book after book after book, it really is, by the time you're in the process, you found the one that works, like, it really is unanimous, which is a great feeling. Like, you're waiting for that unanimous feeling. You want your editor and publicity and marketing and the whole art department, and then like everyone who lives in your house, like, you want everyone to say, that's it, that's what it's going to be, you've got a winner. And then, you know, you work together to kind of tweak it. So it's actually a really fun process.
That sounds fun. And did you decide to capitalize the first letter of every word in the title, or was that, you know, when you were looking at how it looked on the cover?
Yeah, it was more of just an appearance type of thing. Yeah.
Okay, that's neat. It's a fun process.
It is.
So when you wrote this book, were you thinking about the possibility of it being a movie? And do you think about who would play the characters? And if you do, who do you think?
I might turn this around and ask you who you think. You know, it's funny, after what happened with Prada, like, people assume or would think that I write for the possibility that this could maybe be turned into a movie. And don't get me wrong, I would love that. I would welcome it. It was one of the greatest things that ever happened. But I am not a screenwriter by any stretch of the imagination. And what works on a big screen is so different from what works in a 350-page novel. It's just like an entirely different writing beast. And as soon as like a thought like that starts to creep into my head, like how would this look, or how would this work, or should I change? You know, I say to myself, like, no way, were this ever to be adapted, were I ever to be lucky enough that it would be adapted, like, leave it to the pros. There are people who are amazing at doing that, and make this book as true and as honest to itself as it can be as a novel in this format. That to me is really, really important to kind of keep my eye on that prize. That's really where it's at. I think once you start sort of entertaining these other things, once like these thoughts creep into your head, it can't do anything good for the book itself. So I try not to do that.
All right. Well, I hope it becomes a movie. I think it would be a great movie. For me, just because I thought about it a little bit, I like, do you know Lizzie Green from A Million Little Things? She's the teenage girl on A Million Little Things, and she would be great for Max. And then I was thinking maybe Mila Kunis for Sky, and maybe Kaylee Cuoco. You know her? She was
yes.
For Peyton.
Love.
So those were my thoughts. But
perfect. I will pass those along. Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
So one last question, really. And Jennifer mentioned it in the beginning, that The Devil Wears Prada is going to be on Broadway, I think next year, right? And they're starting out in Chicago.
We hope so.
I believe.
Yeah.
Are you involved in that at all? Like, do you have any say in anything that goes on?
Oddly, yes, which is wild. And so cool, because the making of a Broadway show, I mean, having your book sort of adapted into a Broadway show, this has been one of the coolest experiences ever, and something totally new. I mean, I love Broadway. I love Broadway as a consumer who knows very little about it. Just that I really enjoy going to shows the same way that everyone else does. But to kind of see this inside glimpse into the way that it happens, it's a really collaborative process, and it's a really extended one. We've been talking about this for many years now, and it takes so much time to bring all of these creative voices together, who all work on different parts of it, between the music and the lyrics and what they call the book, like the non-sung words, for lack of a better description. There's so many different voices in it, and it's fascinating. So I have been lucky enough to be in on some of the early reads and some of the early castings and some of the cool decisions they're making. It's really, really incredible, and it's one of the things I am most excited about. I'm super hopeful that it will be on schedule for next year. It'd be amazing.
I hope so. I'm a huge Broadway fan, so I'm excited to get my tickets for that one. That should be really fun.
Me too.
So I have one last question, and that is just, what have you read lately that you recommend for this summer, you know, to go in the beach bag with Where the Grass is Green and the Girls Are Pretty? What else should be in that?
That's a good question. I'll recommend one that I would say, my personal definition of a beach read is something that is like compulsively readable. You can't put it down. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all, hammocks and pina coladas, but it's something that you're not having to really, really, really work for, and you just want to you've lost yourself in it. It's a flow activity, and you're turning those pages. So even though it's a little bit darker than what I think people would conventionally call a beach read, I loved The Push by Ashley. I think her last name is O'Drain, O'Dane, and it's a mother-daughter story, but a really, it's almost like a psychological thriller. And I loved it. Like fit the description of can't put it down. Like go away family, go away work, go away everything. I must finish this book right now.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm adding it to my list.
Okay, good.
I just finished The Guncle by Stephen Rowley. So great.
It was
Really great. Another one and a lot of humor. I think you would like it.
terrific. I will add it to my list. Thank you.
All right, I think we're ready for any audience questions, and there she is, Jennifer.
Well, you've actually answered a bunch of the audience questions, but I have two that I'm going to start with. And one, they're both from the same family. The first one I'm going to ask you is, Jenny's 9-year-old son would like to know if writing was your dream job.
That's a great question. You know, I would say writing was my dream job always. Writing books was something that I hadn't even, it wasn't even on my radar, I would say, through college. And I was an English major. You know, I loved reading. I loved English all through school. I was probably stereotypically terrible at math and struggled mightily and just wanted to read and write. I loved all of that growing up. And then I majored in English as an undergrad and loved it even more. I knew when I graduated, my first job out of college was working at Vogue magazine as Anna Wintour's assistant, which of course was what inspired The Devil Wears Prada. But I graduated from college with this English degree and thought for a hot second about going to law school, and then didn't, and thought, you know, I want to write. I'm not sure in what capacity, you know, maybe newspapers, maybe magazines, maybe go work at a publishing house, at a book publisher. So I really sent around a whole lot of different resumes at that point, and it was kind of luck, I guess you could call it, that I ended up at Condé Nast and at Vogue, and that set off the trajectory of working at a magazine. And I loved working at magazines, maybe not fashion magazines. That I don't think that was going to be my you know, niche for long, but I did love magazines back then. And writing a book was something that really kind of came out of nowhere and was like the luckiest, happiest accident that I wrote a book about my time at a magazine, and that sort of set everything off. So now I feel like I do have pretty much the best job ever. And writing, yes, has always been a dream, but now getting to write books is really, really amazing.
Okay, so his 11-year-old brother would like to know how you come up with the names of your characters.
That's also a really good question. Some of them in the beginning books, I used to just name them after people I know. I just wanted to like give cameos to all of my friends and family, and basically everyone I'd ever met in my entire life found their name in the book in the beginning. But I ran out of those really quickly. So now I do a lot of baby naming websites, a lot of baby name books, but you know, it's hard because you want them like a lot of times 40 years older. So I do a lot of going back in all of the Social Security most popular baby list names and all of that for a certain year to find the right age of the character that I'm naming. But I like them to be different, but not too different. I always find that when I'm reading, when I personally am reading something myself, if a name is, I want it to be something that everybody knows how to pronounce in their head as they're reading it, because otherwise I find it just slows me down. I'm always like, am I saying this right? You're not saying it to anyone. You're just saying it in your own head, but it takes me out of the story when I don't know how to pronounce names in books.
That's actually very thoughtful. I like that. So now Jillian has a question. I'm just reading as it's written. I love this ripped from the headlines inspiration. Do you have a list of ideas you go back to, or anything that has happened recently that you might write about in the future?
I also really like and relate to the sort of ripped from the headlines. And the headline that Jillian, I think, is referring to is this novel touches on the college admission scandal. So it's not a direct relation, and it's not like a huge exploration of that, but there's a nugget of that follows all the way through this story. And I'm also intrigued at all times by what's going on in the world and whether or not it's going to find its way into a novel. I will say that I do have an idea for the next book. It's not a ripped from the headlines story, but it's a ripped from the headlines person. And I am still working out the details of it, but I think it'll feel very much along those lines. So I think Jillian will like the next one too.
Okay, well, that just answered 2 questions at once.
Okay.
So we're just going through these audience questions here very quickly. Can you remind us of the book that you just recommended? We have one audience member who would like to know exactly what that is. And
Yes, I have. It's called The Push. I have it's The Push, and the author's name is Ashley Audrain. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. It's Audrain, The Push. And it was phenomenal. I don't expect that you'll sleep the night after you finish it, but you will have loved reading it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so now I've got this rather bizarre question, but I'm going to ask it of you. It's the question is, tell us more about your amazing sister, Dana. I think this might be from your amazing sister, Dana.
It's possible. It's possible. Possible to likely. Yeah, no, she's
as a sibling to a sister myself. Did you always get along with your sister? Or
no,
I mean,
no.
we fought like crazy when we were little.
So did we. We fought terribly, and possibly violently, and it always ended with, don't tell mom, don't tell mom. We were rough with each other for sure, and we have a big age difference. So I'm almost 5 years older. I left to go to college. She was 13, so I wasn't home during her whole teenage years. I was gone. So I would say that we weren't super close. I mean, we were close. She would come visit me in college. I would go visit her in college, but we weren't super close until she graduated from school and then moved to New York City. And we had some overlap there. And that's really when the magic happened. All of that, like, age difference vanished, and we were just the same, living in this amazing city. And now we live very close to each other, and our kids are super close in age, and we're raising them as though they're like siblings. And, that is incredible. That I feel so fortunate for. She's my best friend, and she's just, I feel so lucky that we can live close and raise our kids together. She's also super hostile and amazing. So.
Way we want all of our siblings to be, right?
Yes, exactly. She checks all the boxes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Okay. So, well, thank you so much. And we wish you the best of luck with this book.
Thank you. And thank you for having me the night before publication. This was awesome.
Absolutely. It's so much. I mean, we wish that we could have had you live, signing the books in person and doing things the way we used to, but
we're close. We're getting closer to that, and definitely by the next book.
Excellent. Excellent. So I just want to say thank you, Jennifer and Lauren. This was a great conversation. I love these so much. I mean, I have to say that I feel like it's just so much easier when there are 2 people talking about the book. And thank you all for joining us tonight to watch this.
Thank you, everyone.
Remember that you can still purchase a copy of Where the Grass is Green and the Girls Are Pretty if you want extra copies through the next few hours through the link on the registration webpage. Or, of course, you can borrow a copy from the library. And remember to watch the westportlibrary.org website for future and recorded events that we've been doing during this past year. So thank you again so much for coming, and hope to see you next time, everybody.
Thank you.